people will say, well, days on market will slow the buyer activity down, which it definitely can, because buyers do have that thought process. But does it actually damage the buyer by creating that connotation that then the buyer may not go and see that house? Like, does that actually, which comes back to, like, if we're presenting the property the right way, the buyers are going to show up.
Welcome back to Life at 10 Tenths, where we inspire you to live at the pinnacle of your ability and purpose. I've got my great friend Matt Benelli here with me. My name is Garrett Fry, and we're going to jump right in. Well, maybe we should say, if you want to check out all the cool stuff we're doing, go check us out at Life at 10 Tenths. We got all kinds of great things in there, but let's get jumping right into this episode right now. Matt, Dom.
Oh man, days on market. What a fun metric, right? Like, this is.
I'm excited to talk about this because it's a metric that, I mean, we've done some research on this now. We, like, getting ready for this episode today, we were like, let's actually look at where did this come from? Where did it start? What is the real value of it? How do we feel about it? And with all the talk of clear cooperation out here right now and what people are doing with this and what is important to share and what's not important to share, what is the value of days on market? Who does this give value to? What does this represent? Which made us start going, why is this here? Like, what is it, is it really doing? So, Nat, I'm excited to go down this topic today.
Yeah. You know, it's obviously, well, we're now weeks past NAR's decision to quote unquote keep clear cooperation. Well, no, they did keep it with one small tweak. And one of the big arguments against clear cooperation was public facing days on market metrics.
Yep.
And when people can see that, it hurts sellers, right? And so the question that I kind of wrote down was like, okay, well, is it the days on market that hurt listings, or is it something else? And then you and I were talking about, like, well, let's just kind of dive into, like, what is days on market? What's the history behind it? How did it come around? And, you know, it was a very short research project because it basically happened organically. And it was all started by the MLSs, right? I mean, which kind of makes sense. I'm sure agents were asking questions in the 80s and 90s of, like, hey, how long has this property been on the market? And you could probably see when listings were input into the books, right? There was probably like a date or something on there.
Well, if you think about that right there, like that piece of information, it wasn't as easily accessible for everybody just to go check out, to get their hands on. Like, it was really something a realtor had to be able to share of, oh, this is how many days on market this, you know, this property's currently has right now.
You either had been driving by the house and saw the sign on there, or like you drove by for the first time and you have no idea how long that home had been on the market, right?
Yep. And then, you know, I started watching, you know, agents, you know, many years ago, that we would start, like, it became this thing of, like, we got to get it sold by this date, because we started to realize, I mean, you can see it where it's like, you get a home past a certain time, and it's different in every marketplace is what I've noticed. You get it. There are certain marketplaces we were just in that if you're past 14 days, you get somebody going, I don't know what's wrong with it. Why is it still here? Shouldn't it be sold? But then I've also been in marketplaces where you could have a year's worth of days on market, and people are going like, oh yeah, it's not too bad. Like, this thing's not been on the market for too long. It's like, it's been on for a year, but like with all the other homes in the field, it's like, well, that one's been on the market for a year and that one's been on the market for a year. So it's like, is it that really that bad? But it definitely sets a standard. It sets a platform in there some way, depending on the market, where the buyers are going, I don't know. Like, maybe there's something wrong with this thing. Maybe something's off. I do think it's a good metric. I just don't think it should be forward facing.
Well, what's interesting is, like, it became forward facing because once we developed the technology and MLSs went live, and then they started distributing to different places, and Zillow came about, it just became easy to count that, right? Yep. And ultimately it's a metric that advantages the buyer, right? It doesn't advantage the seller in any way, but there's also one other component, which is the realtor. And it advantages the realtor in having conversations to help set expectations with sellers, right? Because if you're going to be listing a property and in kind of the comp set, we're looking at an average days on market to sold of 60 or 70 or 100 days, it's probably good information to share with a seller to set expectations. But I think we've become way too reliant on this metric, Garrett. And I agree, like the forward facing, it's not going away. No. Days on market's not going away. It's going to be here. But that's been, at least Robert Refkin has talked about this, saying that's why he's such an advocate of the private portal and not clear cooperation, because he could list it in the Compass world and it not accrue days on market until they're ready to go public, quote unquote, with it. And then it starts to accrue those days and doesn't damage the seller, so they could do price testing and all that stuff. But ultimately, my question is, do we spend too much time focusing on that and less time on like, well, what is the initial value proposition of this listing that we want to get out there? Because if we solve that, then we don't even really need to worry about days on market, and we can even correct for any issues with days on market potentially.
Well, this is where I look at like your research as a consumer going and saying, okay, I'm going to go pick a realtor that's going to help me put my home on the market. Like, I think it's an important thing. If those numbers are factors in the determining of how people are going to write offers, how they're going to perceive the property, all those things, like, it is really damn important that you get a professional up front that's going to do this right for you. Because if they miss the mark, if they don't educate you properly, the consumer, they don't educate you properly, if they don't show up and put this property in the best light it can possibly be when it hits the marketplace, you know, if they're not showing you the data that helps you make great decisions, and they're letting you, because the consumers don't know, they're doing the best they can going, I feel like I want to sell it for this. And there are realtors out there that go like, oh, you want to sell it for that? Okay, we'll sell it for that. You need somebody who can come in and going like, that's not a winning strategy. Here's all the data. Here's all the facts. Here's where we need to be. And by the way, if you're not doing that for your client, you could very easily damage them. And that's where I look at the days on market. Does it mean it's a bad property? Does it mean that it's not like, it doesn't have all the goods there? It totally could. It could totally just be presented wrong. And then you got these days that start to incur. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, what's wrong with the property? Nothing's wrong with the property. It's the realtor. Look at them. They're the one that's actually broken. Like,
that's harsh.
It is harsh, but I think that you have to look at like all these factors of what can make days on market happen. And this is why I think it's a bad metric to have in this decision here, because it doesn't necessarily mean good or bad property, but we look at it that way. We attach that to it where we go, oh, what's wrong with this thing? Maybe nothing.
And I think that's an interesting thought because, you know, people will say, well, days on market will slow the buyer activity down, which it definitely can, because buyers do have that thought process. But does it actually damage the buyer by creating that connotation that then the buyer may not go and see that house? Like, does that actually, which comes back to like, if we're presenting the property the right way, the buyers are going to show up. Right? They're going to come see, even if you have a new buyer that enters the market and the property has been on for 100 days, let's say, if it's presented well, the buyers will be like, cool, I want to go check out that property. But then they might go down and see, oh, days on market. That's been on the market for a long time. But here's the other thing, Garrett. Like, I don't think it's the first metric that a buyer is going to go to if a new buyer enters the market. The big problem here is days on market accumulated shows that we missed the mark when we launched, regardless of what the average days on market are. And this is why the best thing to look at, we talk about absorption rate all the time. That's what we really need to be focused on, because that's going to give us a better idea of what the demand is like in the current marketplace, so that we can present and enter the market to attract that existing demand versus going on, you know, and just waiting for new buyers to come into the market all the time, because one buyer coming in the market can make all the difference. But at the same time, if they're not the right one, we're missing an opportunity.
So what if we look at this from the other side? What if days on market is a lever that makes the realtor show up at a better level to not accumulate days on market? Maybe the benefit of having it in there is it actually causes the realtor not to get complacent and be like, oh, we'll just throw your property up and we'll just let it sit there. And then like people are looking at homes going, well, the house down the street from me is on the market for $1 million. Like, is my home worth $1 million? Like, there's realtors, because of all this damage that can occur. They go like, I'm not going to list your home for $1 million. Like, it's not going to sell. I don't want my name attached to it. I don't want my sign in the front yard and days on market accumulating. People going like, Matt doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Like, I don't want to be attached to it. So maybe days on market is actual powerful number. And maybe we need to have the MLS broken into two sections. One is homes and the other is realtors. And so you can now see, here's the homes that are for sale. And by the way, here's all the realtors, and they should have a stamp next to them with days on market for all the properties they've put on the market. And you could sit there and be like,
days on market per realtor.
Oh,
right?
yeah. So you could see actually, well, if we're going to have the stats, like let's share all the stats of like who's doing what and what's happening here. Because if I have to go look at a realtor and be like, man, these guys crush properties. Look at what their days on market is. We've got the stats. Like if we're going to share it, let's share it. Like
It's a very interesting point, because the stats that people see, I was just having a conversation with a new agent yesterday, and he's saying like, how do I, get opportunity when people go research me, they see, one sale. I said, well, yeah, that's what they're going to see. So you're going to have to bring your brand up and add value in other ways to kind of help get past people who are just going to look at your track record. But that really is the only metric that people can go look at for a realtor is how many homes have you sold? Right. And really they can only look at that if you've logged those sales on Zillow, because you can't log into the MLS, even the public facing MLSs, and see realtor stats. But it would be interesting to see, well, how about, sold price to list price, average for realtors and things like that. If the data was just like in sports, if the data was there, maybe people would be making different decisions. Realtors would be making different decisions when it comes to taking on listings.
Anything that would make the realtors out here say, we want to perform at the best we possibly can, because our stats are going to be shown. Like these stats are available. They're here. We attach them to these properties, which I don't think helps the actual consumer, but it could help.
Doesn't help the seller.
It could totally help the actual real estate population go, oh, no. I don't want to incur that many days on market. Like, what if it wasn't attached to the actual homes itself? What if it was attached to the people that were doing the marketing and the one that are making the business choices to be able to help these people down this road? Because my friend Mike Doyle said it the best, and I love him for this. And it's funny, I brought this up a while back with him. He goes, did I say that? He definitely said this. And his line that I love so much, and this is back when there was a lot of days on market that were starting to show up. People were really getting picky about days on market. And he says, days on market are like past lovers to your prospective new mate. The fewer you have, the better. And I love this line so much, because there's a lot of stigma attached to it. There's a lot of energy attached to this as you look at properties. And I think we need to kind of take a step back and understand what is really going on here, what is really happening. Yeah. And I think that it doesn't necessarily depict whether it's a good property or a bad property. It can totally show up that it was just presented wrong to the public up front. Yeah.
Or there was a tough seller who just was not accepting offers. That's always there too. And I think that's where realtors will be like, well, Garrett, you can't pin the stats on us. What if we have a tough client who is just not making the decisions? And I love this idea though, because like, hey, if we're going to talk about transparency, let's be fully transparent. But that said, even with the days on market metric, like we're in the digital age. So even if you took away days on market, you can go look at the property history. Like you'll be able to go see listing history depending on where those properties get listed, unless we do go away from any consumer facing websites and just go complete private portal where you can scrub all that data and not do it. And, it is interesting because I think that the days on market metric is fun to look at and is useful. However, the other thing to note with days on market is when we calculate it, and this is where I see a lot of agents kind of get confused with the data, is you're only calculating it based on sold properties most of the time, right? When we're not then, and this is why absorption rate is so important, because what about the properties that went, let's say average days on market is 30, right? Well, what about the properties that went 200 days and then expired?
Yeah.
Right? They're not factored into that average days on market because they never sold. that's where absorption rate comes in to see here's how many properties were active and the number of properties that were absorbed. So if we want to talk strategy, days on market's not going to be that helpful. Yeah, you might be able to motivate a seller to like price it appropriately, so to speak, but absorption rate and those numbers are always going to be your best bet in terms of creating strategy, because that's really what's going on with supply and demand out there, not days on market.
It's an interesting way, because you're right. And it's funny. It's like, you don't think of it this way, but like when they talk about
the average days on market of the active properties, I mean, maybe some people do, but then like, how does that impact the sold? Well, the average days on market for active properties right now is 100. So we're good. Well, but the days on market for the solds was 30. So if we're trying to just beat 100, we're not going to win.
That's the number they always share is days on market right now for the sold properties is this. And that's actually quite misleading from because if you miss the mark, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to sell in that time.
We can't sell if we miss it. Like we're done. Might as well just take it off the market at that point and wait until we can reset.
But so let's go back to even this history and things like this. Like, and this is where I think it's like, yeah, we have so much information at our fingertips right now, but like I look at a seller, I think as me as a seller, I should be able to put my home out there to the marketplace. If I want to put $2 million on this property and go, what if somebody walks in the door? My house is not worth $2 million, by the way. But what if somebody walks in the door and they look out the back view and they go, this is the view I've always wanted. This is the feeling that I've always wanted. We'll fix the house up. We'll do some things to it to make it, be what we want it to be. But I can't replace that view, which it does have a great view.
It does.
If I want to try, like I should be able to try and not get punished for it, not get damaged by it, not have a history attached to it that they're like, what in the world was this guy thinking back here? It's like I should be able to take my car and drive it down to the corner and put a for sale sign in the front of it. And I guess you can do this as a for sale by owner. I have all the options to go and do this. But if I want to do it professionally and listed, now I've got this history stuck with this thing now, which makes me not want to go and put it in the open marketplace because it could now damage this thing that I have, where now there's this stuff attached to it. I think it's interesting. Like, is all this information good for the consumer? Because who knows what I was going through when I decided to do that. Now I really need to sell, and I need this thing to sell at a good fair market value. Last year I tried that. I accumulated a whole bunch of days on market. I wasn't listening to my realtor. I had an idea in mind of something I wanted to do, but now I really need to sell. And I got all this baggage now attached to it that's damaging me. And it's like, well, why is that there?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Now is now.
And I'll give this perspective too, right? And by the way, we're having fun exploring this. We're not saying what's right and what's wrong here.
No.
At least not yet. But the other side of this is, I think it's just a reflection of the value proposition. And I believe that you can overcome any statistic that is out there, even if you're trying to sell your home for 6 years, right? I mean, and when I sold real estate, I was in a market and there was a lot of towns and there was a luxury market where there were homes that would sit for years, right? Years on the market. And yes, some of them had some pretty massive price reductions, like millions of dollars of price reductions that had to go on. But I think value proposition and how something's presented can completely correct, because the demand is always there. There's always demand. It's making sure that you meet that demand where they're at. And I've talked about this property before because I just think it's an interesting example, because I loved these sellers and we were all on this kind of the same page, at least in terms of the information that was being shared. We were on the market for 2 years essentially. And when we finally sold, we basically took the house off real quick so that we can make some changes internally, some flooring and wallpaper and paint stuff. Nothing significantly major for a house of this size and price point. But it was enough to like make a difference, particularly in the entryway. And then we went back on the market with the price that we originally should have gone out with 2 years prior, and then 2 offers that first week.
Yep.
But anybody would have been able to see that the house was on the market for years. And the buyers who came to the table had known that the property had been on the market at the time. Now they were also, one of them was a new buyer entering the marketplace. So time just kind of worked in favor for the seller to find the right buyer, which can happen. And so I think value proposition is also important to look at here. And like, okay, these stats, while maybe they're not a asset to a seller for sure, does it really damage the listing that much that you can't overcome it and you have a problem property? I don't think it goes that far.
I think the history, like what you just shared, is way easier to overcome with a new value proposition and hitting a property getting it back on the market, reposition, new feel. And there's a reason you can take an expired listing and a new agent picks it up and says, hey, we're going to hit this from a different angle. We're going to change all the marketing around this, and boom, that thing sells. Or they are able to explain to the seller, you're overpriced. We need to get this thing down to a different mark. And the realtor does a great job of repositioning maybe the price of the property and getting a thing down. I think it can always be repositioned. I think when it's on the market and it hits the market, that time of it sitting there and that time of trying to figure out, did we hit the price right? Maybe we need to adjust it down a little bit. Maybe we need to adjust down a little bit. Like if you got an active seller and an active agent that's working hard, trying to figure out how to get this property to leave the marketplace, you can do that fairly quickly. You should be able to have a few days on market, but to try it and to start accumulating some days on market, I think should be in the hands of the seller that's saying, I just want to see, and I'm willing to play, and I can wait a little bit. And if the realtor says, hey, I'm willing to play the game with you right now, and I'm willing to wait a little bit, and let's see if the right buyer is out there. This is where I go and say, I don't know if days on market should be a forward-facing piece out there. I don't think because it really is. The right buyer walks in the marketplace, they should be able to walk up that house and go, I like this, I like the features, I like the view, this feels right to me. And they should do their research and look at the other comps and other homes that have recently sold and do, sit down with their agent and do a full report on like, where does this sit value wise? I agree with that. But that time that it sat there while you waited, I don't think should be a determining factor. I think it's actually a bad metric to use that definitely can hurt in the benefit of the buyer's agent and the buyer to be able to negotiate. I don't think it is a fair factor to the seller. I think it is just a damage. It could potentially be a damaging piece in there that really shouldn't be there. It's a yeah.
And I wonder if there's like a lower limit, because really what I think there's this period in the average where the biggest changes in opportunity happen. Because I think once you're on the market for a certain amount of time, if you're not selling, like we clearly have some problems that no one's willing to correct. And so you're just kind of already at baseline. But what happens is you miss the hype, right? And this is where I don't think days on market is just a reflection of what has happened, because the hype is going to be there when a new property hits the market because it hit the market, not because it's DOM1. It's just because of that time frame. That hype will not be there at DOM 30, whether it's being counted or not, because the buyers that are currently existing in the marketplace is the largest pool that you're going to get eyeballs from when it's new. Mm-hmm. Those buyers have now seen it. And so whether or not we're counting to 15, to 30, to 100, they've seen it and made their decision. And now we're just waiting for new buyers to come in. And this is where, if those new buyers are looking at DOM, they won't know if people have already passed. But I even wonder if realtors are even having that conversation with their buyers of like, hey, if we go see a property that's been on the market for like 60 days, know that the rest of the buying population saw it when it was new and has decided that they don't want it. Like, that's not going to really put a good taste in your buyer's mouth. Oh,
believe me, though,
look at that property, right?
I work with buyers.
What if another buyer enters the marketplace and comes in all of a sudden it's a multiple offer, surprise, and we told them, hey, don't worry about it because it's been on the market for 60 days. And this is where I think getting rid of the metric will help, because I think it just confuses people more than it actually helps them.
I have totally worked with buyers that we're like, okay, here's the strategy. If it's past this certain amount of time, days on the market, those are the ones we're going to go and write lowball offers on. I've done it.
Oh, for sure. I get that too. And
but
however,
that's using that metric specifically as a way of going like, look, these guys are damaged. they're sitting here. They're not moving. They potentially want to move. Let's go in and just start writing. We'll write an offer in there. We'll write it super low, see what they do. They're either going to bite on and negotiate with us, or they're going to tell us to go pound sand. And, you know, and it was my choice as a realtor to say, I'll take the time to do that. And there's some realtors that go, don't waste my time with that. But there was a moment that I was like, sure, why not? What are we up against? What if we change it, Matt? What if we change it from days on market to a color code system? What if the listing went on and it had a green aura around it, like this little green, wonderful color, and then you get to 20 days on market, and that green just starts to yellow a little bit, like it just changes just a little bit, and then you get to 30 days on market, and is it yellow? I mean, I guess we're getting pretty strong into that yellow color, and then you get more days, and it's like, ooh, it's kind of orange now. Like we're getting kind of orange, and then it starts to turn a little brown, and then you're like, is that like a rotting piece of fruit? What is that? Like, what are we watching here? Like, what if we changed it to that? Because I think that all of us would say that's a bad idea. Like. That's a bad idea. But I think that's how the days on market can be interpreted.
It definitely can. Well, now here's another, theory or perspective is, what about the new homeowner that's coming into the marketplace and is making all the right decisions and wants to be seen as that new fresh thing? But no, we have to make sure everybody's treated completely equally. Nobody has a days on market thing. It's like, but we want to be seen as the new. Like we're new, we're coming out with the right value prop. We're pricing appropriately. And now, a new buyer entering the marketplace will value that listing the same as the other one. I don't know. Is that fair?
I think if you're a homeowner and you want to have that, put a big date sign, like a happy birthday sign in front of your house in one of the photos where it goes like, we were listed, we're new. Look, this is the date today, right now.
Just change that photo every single day.
Pop that one out when it gets old.
Just like Dave Baslaw changes his voicemail every day. Just be like, every day we're going to just put a new timestamp on this listing. Keep it fresh. I mean, hey, you do that in retail stores, right? Keep the product fresh out front. You don't want to see the same product in the front of the store for weeks on end, because we were like, I've seen that. That's been sitting there for a long time, right? It's an interesting conversation.
I like
right?
the color coding, by the way. I'm going to go back to that real quick, Matt, because I could totally see a buyer come in there imagine you walk into the grocery store and they've got like all the fresh fruit, all the fresh vegetables. And then there's that crappy one that's sitting over there on the sides. Like, is it still food? Yeah, it's still food. It's kind of like, I don't know, it's looking a little funky though. Like, I would totally take it up. I'm not going to do this, by the way, but you could totally take it up to the register and be like, this one's a little funky, like half price. Would you do half price on it?
Well, I mean, hey, that exists in the imperfect produce kind of world, right? People do sell imperfect produce that's the same nutritional value, but it looks different.
But that's how people look at days on market, is like, this thing has gone stale, it's dirty, it's broken, something's wrong with it. And it's like, no, it's still a house. It's still a great roof. It's great walls. It's got paint on it. It was just maybe presented to the marketplace wrong. When that beautiful apple hit the shelf, they just, for some reason, stuck it in the very back corner where people couldn't reach it. And now it's rolled its way up to the front, and it's kind of, like, is it the apple's fault? Like, it just wasn't positioned right up front. And I think that these are things we should just be paying attention. I think it's a great way to educate our buyers that are in the marketplace, of saying, like, don't just assume that high days on market property, because this number exists, is a bad home. Like, there's some great houses out there that just were positioned in the marketplace wrong up front.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's setting the expectations too of like, hey, here's our opportunity if there is here, but also know that somebody else might see that opportunity, because it could even create, it doesn't typically, but it could create demand of like, hey, this property, if inventory slows down and you have a property that's been sitting there for a while, all of a sudden the buyers will be like, I don't know if new stuff's coming in. Let's go after this old one here together, and everybody's doing it at the same time together. And all of a sudden we have multiple offers. You got to prepare people. And I will say this for days on market too, in the risk that people unknowingly walk into, which is seasonality, right? Absorption rate, you can clearly see seasonal trends when you're looking at the numbers. And unless you are calculating that from a seasonal perspective, it can be missed a lot on DOM. And also it depends on how that's being calculated. Are we talking about days to contract, or are we talking about days to sold? Because that creates some difference too. And I just think the DOM metric's confusing. That said, I'm a big fan of data. I like it. Like, let's put it all out there. You're like, hey, let's just see what the data shows. I don't dislike your idea of putting the data for the realtors out there either, Garrett. Granted, I'm not necessarily impacted by that. Maybe we should put the data on the coaches out there too.
No. Put it all out there. I think so. I think, like, talk about the holidays, talk about seasonality. Like, I know that there's a lot of people that make the decision of saying, hey, we're coming in to the holidays right now. Let's pull this thing off the market. Let's put it back on after the first of the year, because we don't want to accumulate the days on market of going through the holidays and potentially having this thing sit here. There's not as many buyers out here. Everything's a little bit different. People are busy. But what if you didn't have that? What if you weren't worried about that and you could just say, you know what, let's let it ride through the holidays here and see what happens? Because we might have, actually, I look at the holidays and I go, that's when it's actually, there's a lot less buyers, but they're more serious buyers. Like, those are the buyers that are willing to screw up their holidays to go looking at homes. Like, I look at it and go like, well, what if that metric wasn't there? We could take that element out of it, that fear of collecting days on market, that it might sit through the holidays, and be like, let's give it a shot. Like, it shouldn't affect the decision-making process.
Here's an interesting theory, because I agree with you on that. And like, I sold my home during the holidays, put it on the market at the beginning of December, which everyone's like, why would you do that? It's like, well, because we kind of had a new home that we needed to move into in January. And we did kind of go a little bit longer than typical because it was the holidays, but we got an amazing price and an amazing buyer for our house. Everybody was happy. And maybe because we know the metric's not going to go away, right? Even when you get into, like, if say we ditched clear cooperation and everybody developed their own private portal, and which made it very confusing and hard, or maybe made it easier, and they all agreed we're not going to put DOM. Slowly it would creep back in somehow. Agents would watch when properties get listed. They'd note that. And then they'd be like, yep, this was originally listed actually in this portal over here on this date. And yeah, it came over to this portal 2 months later, but know that it's already been on the market for 60 days prior to that.
I don't, right? There's too many properties moving around.
You personally went and did your spreadsheet. Well, yes, there's too many properties out there. I get that. But how about this? What if we showed the median and average stats? If next to listings, consumers were able to see market statistics easily, to see how things stack up, right? And they were able to see, oh, this property's been here, but seasonal trends show that that's, compared to the ones that have sold, but also compared to the ones that are active on the market, because the active trends will also tell you how the market could be shifting. And this is why realtors are so important, because if you guys pay attention to this and understand it, you can guide your buyers and sellers and be able to adjust, because the marketplace is not fair. Right? The marketplace is never fair, and it's not designed to be fair. And so you can take advantage of that by having good knowledge and good strategy and presenting incredible value of your listings. And same thing on your buyers, presenting great value as a buyer when you come to the table to write a contract on a house. It's totally doable.
Well, this is why I love realtors gathering their own data, pulling their own numbers, getting their own stats, so you can actually sit down with somebody and say, look, this is what I know is going on. Here's the numbers that I pull. You've talked about absorption rates a couple times now. Absorption rates, months of inventory, odds of selling. These are really important factors for your buyers and your sellers to understand about what's going on in the marketplace right now. And I think that, and I look at what kind of stats could we share? Like, if we're going to share, what if I was looking at a house and not only did it have the days on market, but it also had next to it, homes in this price range typically sell currently right now for this percentage of list to sell price.
And then what price range are those measured on and all that kind of stuff?
And there's so much data if you want to present it. And this is where I kind of go what is valuable data? If we're going to go down this route, how much should you share? How much should you not share? Why do we pick what gets shared and what doesn't get shared? And who is it really in favor of. And I think there's a part of it of saying, oh, well, this is clear cooperation. It's here to help the consumers. And there's some information that I say, actually, let's just be honest. I think it's here to help the actual realtors. And, how much do we share? How much do we not? There's no right answer, by the way.
There is no right answer, but I think that's when you look at the history of how a metric like days on market has evolved. It was there to help realtors perform their duty to serve their buyers. Mostly was how it started, because that was probably the questions that people asked, and is now evolved into something else. And you mentioned it would be hard for an agent to track all the data on that listing and that listing. You build an AI agent to go scour the websites or read your email of like, oh, Garrett had announced this coming soon listing, 2 months ago. You got this email on 123 Main Street, and I've been watching it and it hasn't sold. And here's how many days on market it actually is.
Such a geek, such a geek. But okay, so now you've opened up another can of worms, because it's interesting is I just did this on a property and I asked myself, why is this thing not selling? Like, why is this home not selling? And it was an apartment in Hawaii. And it was really interesting, or condo in Hawaii. It was really interesting because it went back and pulled up a fire that happened in that building. It pulled up all the updates and things that were being done to improve the sprinkler system and, ingress and egress. And this stuff wasn't done yet. Like, it had not been completed and it had not been finished. And it had all this history on this unit. And so, to all that being said is like, there's an amazing amount of information at our fingertips. I've never even seen this house, this condo. I've never even been there. I don't even know what it looks like, but I got a lot of history on it real quick just by asking some questions.
And I think that highlights, and I'll be curious to hear people comment below this video, one, on your thoughts on days on market and what stats, quote, should be shown or not be shown. Just would love for you guys to join the conversation on this. If you're listening on audio, just hop over to YouTube and join the conversation of it in the comments here. And it is interesting, Garrett, and I think this is where realtors will excel, is if you pay attention to this stuff, because more and more people are going to be using AI for search than search, and they're going to collect information. Some of it might be right, some of it might be wrong, but the fact is, data is not going away. It's just going to become more available. Mm-hmm. It's going to be very difficult to restrict data, even if we went private portal, because somewhere, someplace, someone's going to have it on their own website, and a bot is going to be able to pull that and share it. Like, if we get rid of the distribution, there will be a software solution to making that happen for an individual. You could probably build it right now to go scour every single real estate website out there to get all of the available quote unquote inventory, even if it's not listed on Zillow. But it's going to move fast.
We're just getting started in this age of the amount of information at our fingertips is insane.
It really is. So, well, guys, would love to hear your thoughts on this. This was fun. We're going to probably do some more podcasts like this, because this is kind of a really fun exploratory one, Garrett. Particularly, we had some different ideas on this one.
Mine were right.
So if you guys want to join in on conversations like this, we actually talk about this stuff inside our community as well. When we do masterminds with our one-on-one people will post questions inside our 11 Circle community and the Connect and Discuss, because not only is live coaching something we do every single week, but we have a whole section where the people in that program can gather and communicate. And we also get to share some additional content. If you guys like this podcast, we have a starter membership with some additional content about book insights, about winning your morning with gratitude and getting your mindset in tune, and all of these incredible things that are available to you inside our starter membership. So go to lifeat10tenths.com and you can learn all the different levels that are available. And if you guys love listening to this and want to support us, just give us a share. Share this episode with somebody who you think might find value out of it. That's the best thing that you could possibly do for us, because we love doing this. And I love when I got a text last night, Garrett, where someone was like, hey, love listening to your podcast. I'm actually have a client who lives in your area and would love to be connected with a great agent there. And I was like, yeah, we can do that. I love it. And thank you so much for listening to the podcast, because it just means the world to me that people listen to this. And I know it does to you as well, Garrett.
Oh yeah, no, it's amazing. And there's no better feeling than when somebody calls you to share, like, this is the value I get out of the podcast. Because Matt, this is why we do this. We love doing this. And obviously we're building a community, and obviously we do coaching, but there's a reason we've been showing up for, I don't know how many years now? Six
Six
solid.
on 7 at some point.
Yeah, twice a week. Love doing this. So I will say in the comments below, just to wrap this one up, if you think we should go to a color coding system rather than an actual days on market, I would love to get some traction behind this. I think it would be really interesting.
It would be interesting because you could, if you did a color coding system versus DOM, you remove the number and get to give it relativity, because that color can change based on the way the market's moving. So in some markets, green might only last for 14 days, but in other markets, green might last 30, 45 days.
Oh yeah, there'd be some math.
Theory. I like that idea.
There'd be some math behind it. Be like, this is actually still considered a nice, fresh piece of produce in this marketplace. Like,
no mold on this one.
I know in other markets you would step over this, you might just throw it in the trash, but in this market, it's still considered fresh.
I love it.
All right, man.
Well, thanks everybody. We appreciate you, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thanks, everybody.